So in order to make your own humanoid character, you need to begin by designing it. You can either draw out your own turntable images to block out from, you can alter and combine images online, or you can use Make Human, which is a software that allows you to set specifics of a character and work from that. So with these slides on the front screen, you can adjust the fundamentals of your character from the gender, age, muscle, weight, height, proportions, as well as any ethnicity you'd like. Now with this software, once you have the foundations in place, you can then go to the other tabs and adjust any specifics you would like. Now for your character, you're going to want it in a T-pose. So you need to go to the Pose/Animate tab, and then under Pose on the right hand side, select T-pose. You can also add expressions to make your character more unique and have a different default facial animation, which can add character to your model. At the top of the screen, you'll have these various icons which show the different viewpoints you can set the model to. The viewports I use are the front, side and top, which are the most useful for blocking out from. Now once you've designed the general base for your character, you can then sketch on the various accessories and designs. You want to do this for each perspective in order to get an accurate blockout, which will make high poly modeling much easier. You'd want to make sure they are lined up as close as possible. Since we use Make Human, we have the grid outline which we can compare with to the layer underneath. Just adjust the opacity of the top layer to see if it matches the grid below. Once that's done, use the crop tool to crop them to be the same width and height pixel size. Try to keep the numbers even so you can easily scale them up and down in 3ds Max. As I do this, I line up the crop tool to the grid to make sure it all lines up correctly. Now once you apply the crop, every image in your document will be that size. So now that these are cropped to the correct size, you can then build on top of the naked images, adding in clothing and other details. You can either sketch or use various reference images taken online. Just make sure you alter it to make your own work. I'll probably trace over the images just to ensure it's completely fine to use. Here are some basic examples to give you an idea. Okay, for this step, we're going to place reference images in 3ds Max. If you've got the resolution of your images, right click it, select Properties, hit Details, and you can find the exact dimensions. Once you know the dimensions of your images, you want to draw out a plane and set it to the pixel size of your reference images. Now if these appear too large, just scale them down in ratio. You can start by halving them and keep going until you reach a sensible size. Rotate your plane 90 degrees until it's perpendicular with the floor. At this stage, you'll be applying your reference image to the plane. Select the material editor and under diffuse, hit the grey box. Followed by bitmap and then select your front image. You can now drag this material to the plane and then select Show Shaded Material in Viewport if it appears grey. Now because it's a plane, only one side will have the texture. Now we're going to make some adjustments to this plane. Go to Object Properties, and under Display Properties you want to deselect Show Frozen in Grey, and you want to select Backface Cull. Now you can see through your reference image when looking through the back. This will let you manipulate the blockout much easier later on. Now clone this plane to add in your other reference images. Do this by holding Shift and dragging on the gizmo. Line it up so it's next to the front reference image. This will now be your side reference image. Now here we're going to do the same thing as before, and we're going to insert our side image. Here I'm just going to copy in another side. So I have both, so every perspective I look at I always have the reference image behind the blockout. So if you have two sides now, you don't have two different side materials, otherwise you'll have a texture which isn't flipped. So both sides will be looking opposite ways since they're rotated 180 degrees. So for one of your side textures, under the angle panel here, you can just adjust these UVW angles to give you the correct flip. Now, whichever one works best, just use it and then you can just rotate the planes so they fit correctly. Now that we have the front and side reference images, we'd want to drag out the top. Now this is particularly useful to get the width of the arms. And that's pretty much all there is with the reference images. They have a nice cube you can work within to make your block out, and no matter which angle you look at, you always have something to work from. So for blocking out, it's essentially creating the shape to work on in ZBrush. If you're more confident in 3ds Max, I would definitely try and put as much detail in here as you can afford. This will let you have an easier time in ZBrush, which will probably be less stressful for you. You'd want to start by inserting a cube around the abdomen area and drag it so it lines up with the reference images. Now under modifiers, you'd want to set the cube to poly edit mode. From here you can extrude edges. Now once you drag out more edges, you can then use the vertices to refine your shape. So to speed up your workflow, if your character was symmetrical, you can work on half of the model and then hit the mirror tool to create an instance which would then replicate whatever you did on that side to the opposite side. Now at the end you would just need to weld all the vertices down the middle together and you have your block out. So just drag out the instance and make sure it's all lined up so it's perfectly symmetrical. And then from here you can just work on half of your model and it will be copied over to the instance. So for blocking out, at this point, what we'd want to do is look at every single point of reference you have and just add in edges. You can swift loop if you need to add more detail and just make sure all the curvature's there. Swift loop just creates a loop wherever you click. So if you have an area which is too low poly and you want to add more curvature, just go to the modeling tab at the top and select swift loop, and it's just as simple as that. Now here's some progress of the block out. I've just continued the torso up to the shoulders and the neck, and I've dragged it all the way down to the feet. So it's giving me a very basic block out, it's giving very simplistic shapes, but this is all I need to work with to get my look in ZBrush. So as you can see, I've gone around all the sections of the viewport and I've tried to drag in vertices in places and edges to get the curvature for certain areas like the spine. The spine needs to be selected and dragged in to give you the desired look for a human. Now this can be very rough, but as long as you have some curvature, it will help a lot in ZBrush. Otherwise, when you drag it in, you have a lot of problems that you need to fix. So yeah, editing the foundation shapes while they're in low poly makes it much easier to adjust the overall shape. Whereas in high poly, you have too many polygons and vertices to maneuver, so it's not really a good idea. Now for the neck, just make sure you have the edges lined up to the reference image so you can easily extrude up from that. If you don't have the correct amount of edges, just use Swift Loop to create edges straight down the entire model, and it's just a quick and easy way to get it done. Now that was just done to give you a rough idea, but I won't continue it because I already have a pre-made model to use after. But it's the exact same process for the arms, just make sure you have the edges lined up, and then just select the polygons and just extrude them out as much as you want. I'd recommend extruding out a large distance like this, and then using Swift Loop to get the incremental details and the incremental curvature, because it just saves a lot of time, and the whole point of this is to be quick and efficient. Remember to use every viewport when you're doing this, as you can see, the top viewport shows us that the arms are way too wide. So there's big differences in size and shape with the arms for these characters. So at this point my model is pretty much complete. I'm just going to show you how to work on appendages. So as you can see here, this is the basic kind of hand you can have where you wouldn't really have any levels of detail and it's easiest to block out. But with this type I would recommend going in ZBrush and adding in a thumb at least. You'd also want to work on the ears, which I personally add in ZBrush, but if you're more comfortable in 3ds Max, feel free to drag in some cylinders and adjust them to give you the ear shape. Now on this hand, I'm just going to show you how to add in fingers. It's as simple as dragging in a cylinder, then you just want to line it up with the size of the finger. You then just want to rotate and scale it to try to line it up as best as you can with the actual finger size. Adjust the vertices to actually suit the hand you attach them to. The same thing can be done for the ear. You just want to drag it in place, scale it down, and then angle it so it looks like it's attached. But yeah, as I said before, these are just ideas to what you could do. I personally prefer doing all this in ZBrush as I have more control, and I find it easier because I've gotten used to the software. But yeah, for this method, once you have everything done and in place, you just want to attach them to the main body of the blockout. Now once your blockout is complete, you want to apply a smoothing group. The way this is done is by going to polygon selection, selecting everything, and then applying a polygon smoothing group. Now the curvature of the humanoid is clearly shown. Now you may notice around the edges that they're very harsh lines. So what we're going to do is we're going to select the edges of all of these sides. We're then going to chamfer the edges. So what this does is it adds in more edges in between and it gives you a rounder appearance. Just adjust the chamfer to a place where you feel comfortable with. And while you're doing this, you may notice some issues with topology like this, but once you put this into ZBrush and it gets divided and smoothed out, these won't be a problem anymore. Here I'm just trying to target weld them, but at the end of the day, this is irrelevant. So another method of smoothing and rounding out your character is by using the modifier called Turbo Smooth. This will just subdivide and round off your character, but be careful using this if you have many different elements on your character, because as you can see for the fingers and ears, they get smoothed off drastically different to the base shape. Once your blockout is done, just go to File, Export, and save it as an FBX.